Welcome. This is the Midlife Rising podcast. Have you ever noticed how our culture celebrates women when we're busy, when we're productive, logical, and just getting things done? But it doesn't celebrate us so much when we rest, when we nurture ourselves or others, when we express emotions. We've all been raised in a society that values what we'll call masculine energy, which is the doing, the achieving, the producing. And it subtly, or not so subtly sometimes, dismisses feminine energy. And that has to do with the being and the feeling and the receiving. Here is the problem with that for you, if you're our 40 plus listener. When you hit midlife and menopause, your body is no longer able to run on overdrive and action. The symptoms that so many of us struggle with, exhaustion, sleepless nights, mood swings, the sense of losing control, those aren't just random, and they're also not just physical. They're actually the body's way of saying you can't live in masculine energy anymore. So on today's episode, we're going to explore what these two energies actually mean, feminine and masculine, and why Western culture has conditioned us to live almost entirely in the masculine. So make sure you stay till the end, because that's when we're going to link this to your menopause symptoms directly and share how reclaiming the feminine side of yourself is actually the key to easing the symptoms and feeling like yourself again, maybe even more powerful than before. So if that is of interest to you, then stay tuned. Let's dive in. You're a woman over 40 who spent your life being the one who holds it all together. But now your body's changing and your soul is done pretending everything is fine. Welcome to Midlife Rising. We're your hosts, Sherry and Jen, twin sisters and modern medicine women, here to help you rewire your stress response, balance your hormones, and reclaim your feminine power. Every episode is a rebellion against the rules you never agreed to and a return to yourself. Join us where midlife isn't a crisis, it's a catalyst. Hey, Jen. Hey. It's good to be back after 3 weeks of a break for me and break from the podcast for you, at least, not so much from work.
No, a 3-week vacation. I don't think I've ever done that.
Yeah. I took 3 weeks off. I don't know. I don't even know if I've ever done that before, actually. It's always 1 week. I never feel like I can take, especially when I worked in the corporate world, never felt like I could take more than a week. Like that would just, not even for myself, like the amount of work that would be left when I get back, but I felt like I couldn't leave everybody else in a lurch for that long.
Yes. Yep. And the judgment that you might receive.
Oh,
that's what I felt that too. Like,
yeah.
3 weeks. Now, people in Europe might not feel this. I used to meet people on vacation from Europe who would take 4 weeks vacations. They would take sabbaticals, and it was much more accepted there. So,
yeah.
But North America,
especially in the US, like a lot of US companies actually, we're going on a tangent here, but they only get 2 weeks vacation, maybe 3.
It's not actually a tangent, Cher. This is very relevant to what we're going to talk about today.
That's true. Okay, let's get into that. And we can link it back to this. So do you want to sort of intro us into what we're going to talk about today, Jen, and why it's important?
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk about today is a societal conditioning, a societal norm that is affecting how busy women are. In fact, it affects how busy everybody is, especially in Western cultures, and particularly how women operate. And it is leading to much worse symptoms in North America than it is in other countries, like peri-menopause symptoms. So it's masculine and feminine energies. And the concept is what I call masculinizing, not in a physiological way, but in an energetic way.
So why is this important?
So it's really important for midlife women because masculinizing and I'm going to talk about what this is, but masculinizing, I can't even say it properly. Masculinizing is something that affects many women, and it causes us to be busier than needed, regardless of our situation. And it can lead to, well, the busier we are, the more stressed we are, the higher the cortisol in our system, the more difficult the cortisol insulin balance, and then the worse the symptoms.
Can I also just say that this doesn't just affect women. It actually affects men as well. We're not going to talk about that today, but this is why men aren't allowed to cry, right? Like this affects men as well. It's not just women. It's not just, like you said, it's an energy. It's not whether you are a man or a woman. Every person has both masculine and feminine energy, and our entire society is being masculinized, at least in Western culture, right?
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit then, and I'll just talk about what I mean by masculine and feminine energies and what I mean by masculinizing. Masculine and feminine energies are a dualism that exists in everybody. It's just a fact of nature. So we have these energetics inside of, like in our bodies, in our aura. When they are out of balance, we feel stress and resistance. So I imagine it as like people who are born into a female physiology have more feminine energy than masculine. Typically.
Naturally. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a whole spectrum. And people who are born into a male body will have more masculine energy. However, we need both of those energies in our bodies to function in this world. So there's no bad or good. They're just natural and needed.
It's what we were talking about yesterday. It's yin and yang. This is not, even if our listeners haven't heard us or anybody else talk about it in this particular way, they've probably gone to a yoga class where they're talking about yin and yang. Yin is the restorative yoga classes, the slower moving, whereas the yang is the power yoga and that feels more masculine. And we need both in yoga and energy.
Yes, exactly. So the problem is that Western society has typically praised and glorified the masculine energies. And that leads us to shift our energy unnaturally towards the masculine.
So how do we do that? What are some of the things that we do?
I kind of have a list of like the different feminine and masculine energies. So we can kind of walk through these 6 or 7 of them. And they're not opposites, but they complement each other. So in a nutshell, feminine energy is about being, just being, whereas masculine energy is about doing. So you can imagine how that can show up in life. Like, so if you think about like being is just surrendering, it would be in the physical world, relaxing, resting. And masculine energy is about action. So we need doing action energy in our lives, or we would never do anything. Like we need it to survive.
Right.
However, we also need to balance that with just being, or we won't survive, which is why so many women are barely surviving. They don't feel like they're thriving. They feel like they're just barely surviving because they're in a doing action all the time.
Yeah. They're just holding their heads above the water.
Mm-hmm. So then you're flailing. Like literally, if you're holding your head above water and kind of feeling like you're drowning, you're flailing around.
Yep.
Doing a lot of action that isn't necessary and isn't always productive.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So can I just talk about an example of something one of my clients was talking about? And it actually portrays this perfectly, because she had plans to just be. She, to sit in her garden and read a book and do a little bit of the program work and care for herself. And so she had planned to do that after work and then found herself still sitting at her laptop at 7:00 at night. And then it's time to make dinner and rush off to all the other things you need to do in the evening and go to bed. And she said, I was conscious of sitting there at my laptop, not actually doing anything very productive, but doing. And it was almost like a compulsion, was the way she described it, couldn't actually pull herself away, even though she was aware that what she was doing wasn't actually all that productive or necessary.
I get like that with my computer. I have to sometimes actually stand up and say, out loud, I've done enough.
Oh, that's a good hack.
Yeah, because otherwise I'll sit at my computer and start doing stuff. Like I'll start cleaning out my inbox, or I don't know, like random stuff that's not particularly productive or necessary. It's kind of necessary to clean your inbox out at some point. But I spend after I finish my day, I always, even if I'm about to take a lunch break, I often catch myself just doing random stuff for 10 or 15 minutes before I get up and have lunch.
And you know what else? When my husband is not here, because I'm usually on my own for a couple of nights a week, those nights, I don't sit down and watch TV or read a book. I work. Like even now, I find myself going, well, it's a mindset of, well, if I get this done now, then I don't have to do it tomorrow. And when I do that, I still have just as much to do the next day. It doesn't matter. It's not like it lightened up my next day.
It never does in our world. That comes from our childhood conditioning, which is like Mom always said, get your work done and get it over with so that then you can play. And then what would happen was all our friends would be outside playing. And by the time we finally got outside to play, we'd have barely half an hour to play with them because they'd be done. And so we never got to play. No, I shouldn't say never, but so often that was get your homework done and then you can play. And we always wanted to leave it till Sunday night because after a week of school, you need to rest and re-inspire before you do your homework. You cannot do homework on a Friday afternoon. And it's the same in adult life. If you're tired and you've been in action all week, by Friday morning, you're tired. You need to rest, surrender, recharge.
Which is why I actually don't do meetings. I don't do meetings on Fridays because I need that day to sort of rest and prepare for the next week.
So then you need the weekend. That's why Sunday night is always a good time. It was always a good time to write an essay. And I'd knock off the essay in an hour. Whereas trying to do it on a Friday or even on a Saturday morning, it would take forever because my brain hadn't had time to process the week. It hadn't had time to rest and imagine the ideas that I needed to put into the paper.
Right. Which is something we're going to talk about, I think, in one of the other.
Yes, we will get to that.
Energies, right? Or one of the other.
Yeah. So,
okay. So what's the next one?
Feminine energy is emotional and masculine energy is thinking and logical. So feminine is emotional and feeling. And we know this, right? There's a stereotype about how women are emotional, women are nurturing, women are the feeling people, the feeling sex. And men are logical thinkers, fact-based. So now let's think about this in terms of workplaces.
Well, okay. The first thing I want to say, Jen, is, oh my gosh, if I ever was starting to feel teary, run to the bathroom, pull yourself together and make sure nobody sees that side.
Yeah.
And that happened to me a few times, especially if I got really, really angry about something or overwhelmed or didn't know how to deal with something. It wasn't always this is making me sad. It was, this is making me angry, or this is making me frustrated or upset in some way. And I actually think that men and women are equally emotional. It's just that men have been taught to quash that side of them And now women in the workplace are as well.
So this problem shows up in workplaces in so many ways. So first, exactly, like in workplaces, we talk about how don't show emotions, keep your cool, maintain your composure. And so there's that side of it. Don't show your emotions. And even as a leader, we're not necessarily supposed to be nurturing, even though there's plenty of leadership courses and advice out there lately that shows that nurturing leaders are better leaders. But it's still very hard to implement that in many workplaces today. Then there's this whole thing around like workplaces were started by men. Like the whole business world in Western cultures began with men. So although, of course, feminism has come a long way and there are many women in workplaces, the whole problem with this is that we are trying to fit the man's mold in the business world. So in academics, they call it the ideal worker. So the ideal worker in the male created business world is unemotional, fact-based, on all the time, able to works constantly, is very productive. And if you don't fit that, if you're emotional and nurturing, you don't fit the ideal worker.
Well, and I think, Jen, that the male created workplace is so normal that we don't, I didn't even question that. It never even occurred to me that it was male oriented and I don't even know what to call it, like full of masculine energy, because I didn't know any different. I've never seen a company operate in a feminine, like using more feminine energy. So I think most people, and me included, until recently, that wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even question that. I was like, well, this is the way business works.
And it is.
And yet now I'm starting to see but what if we did it a totally different way?
It'd be amazing. And you, our listener, will start to see that as we go through these other male and female energies. Even outside of workplaces, the masculine is more celebrated, masculine energy. So thinking fact-based logic rather than emotional. So if I think back to when we were kids, Dad was very stoic and we were told, even as girls, not to show our emotions. I remember them making fun of me for crying at a sad movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I totally remember that.
And I didn't think it was funny that they were making fun of me. I felt completely ashamed.
Yeah.
So I learned, don't show emotions. If I had a crush on a guy at school, we were made fun of at the dinner table. And so I learned not to show my emotions, whether it was love, anger, sadness. And then when we got angry, and the few occasions where I ever stood up for myself, we got punished. So don't show your anger either. So we were taught in so many different ways, don't show your emotions. That's not the way that we work. And still today, my husband does that with my daughter.
Yeah. Stop crying.
Stop crying. Why are you crying? Stop crying.
I wanted to add there, just because people don't know our parents and don't know our family and might be sitting there thinking, well, my family wasn't like that. I just want to say we came from we perceived it as a loving home. We had a good upbringing. We had a lot of fun as kids too. We had a generally good upbringing. This was not anything that I would consider traumatizing or, we're just talking about things that many parents do with good intentions and without realizing how it's creating coping mechanisms or causing us to shift our energies from feminine to masculine in this case right now that we're talking about, that it's not so if you're somebody who's sitting back going, well, my parents weren't like that, or I came from a really loving home. We did too. And yet it's only now in hindsight that we can really kind of look back at how did these patterns that we have now develop? And they all stemmed from good intentions. Our parents all have good intentions. They all raise their kids the way that they think is best, that's going to serve them.
Yeah.
So it's not a criticism of our parents. It's an observation.
Sherwin telling our daughter to stop crying is also, like, I asked him why he does that all the time. And well, he doesn't want her to be like that in public. Like, he wants her to grow up being a composed child. So he has his, like, the best intentions for her. He's trying to teach her something. And that comes from this perception that masculine energy is better. Showing your emotions, showing your feminine side is bad or weak.
Yep. I've got someone in my life who has 3 little girls, and they do the same thing, but it's to like toughen them up. I want them to be tough was the words that they used. Mm-hmm.
And then on the opposite side, so just another workplace anecdote on the opposite side of like masculine energy is thinking and logic in workplaces, whether you're an entrepreneur in corporate, wherever, at least in my experience, it's always a focus on thinking, logic, and fact-based decisions in workplaces. Don't use your intuition to make decisions in business. Now that's changing.
Pros and cons.
Yes. Analyze.
Right. It's like analyze, let's look at the data. Let's look at the pros and cons. Even as kids, like, make your list, your pros and your cons.
Mm-hmm. It's not, what does your gut say? Even though I know plenty of men who use their gut for making decisions. And in fact, some of the best leaders in the world make decisions using their gut. And that's not celebrated.
No, but I think the best leaders actually do. I noticed this. I used to work with executives, particularly one of the companies and that I worked at, and you could see a huge difference between the executives that actually followed their intuition and the others that were trying to follow the data, because there was always more data being introduced, and then they'd sway, change their mind, and they'd go back and forth, and they'd never make a decision. And it was frustrating for those of us around them who just needed we need a decision. Let's move forward. It was the intuitive ones, the ones that were willing to go with their gut and finally just be like, all right, we need to move on. So this is what I'm feeling is the right answer. Go.
That is exactly what used to happen at this company I worked at for a while. They were so data focused that that's exactly what they would do. They would change their minds, and the leadership team would constantly be changing their minds. And everybody in that company was working 14-hour days because nobody trusted their intuition. So they constantly were sending us to do another analysis, a new scenario. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. And so the whole culture was crazy busy.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, Jen.
So next contrast is feminine energy is creating. It's a creation energy, whereas masculine energy is producing.
Yes, makes sense.
So creating, it's pretty logical. Women's bodies are the ones that create a baby.
Create life.
Yeah, we create life. Of course, we need men to do that, but we're the ones creating it in our body. And then creation energy actually comes from our second chakra in our womb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if you want to create a book, a painting, anything, a project, that creation energy comes from our womb, which is a feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas masculine is producing. So that's a doing energy. And I used to say in corporates, that's fine. If masculine energy is producing, we need that, of course. But if that energy is like the production line, who's creating the innovation? If everybody is trying to produce all the time, then who's sitting back and relaxing and coming up with ideas? Like, creation energy is feminine. It comes from surrendering. The best ideas come when we're resting, when we're able to let our mind wander and imagine.
Yeah. In the car, when you're jogging, when you're in the shower, it's when you're able to allow your mind to just wander.
And you can't do that when you're in action all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Like even like that's why meditation is such a good tool. It's that because you're sitting in silence, so you can actually feel your emotions. That doing pushes away. Doing pushes your emotions back down.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole episode on that too. How busyness and producing allows us to distract ourselves from our emotions.
Exactly.
And meditation also I think there's a lot of people out there who think that meditation is about clearing your mind. And I always say it's not about clearing your mind. It's about noticing what's filling it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about allowing your mind to wander so that you can process what's on your mind, but also to notice, why does my mind keep going there? Why does this keep coming up for me? I can totally see that one. Anything more to say on that one before we move to the next one?
Nope. Next one is it's similar. So a feminine energy is receiving and masculine is consuming.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So patriarchy and capitalism are based on a masculine energy. It tells us that unless like we have to keep consuming, that's the entire driver of our economies today.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah. You need more people. That's why Canada is always, allowing immigrants in, because we need more people to keep our economy going. There's other reasons too. We need population growth in order to keep consuming, or we need to consume more, which is what advertising is all about. You need this to be happy. So that's all a masculine energy, whereas feminine energy is receiving.
Well, and explain the difference between like when we consume, when we purchase something, we then receive it. So what does receiving mean in this context?
It's more of a surrendering, receiving in gratitude the food that I'm going to eat, not consuming everything in sight.
How often have you polished off a plate of cookies? Maybe you don't do, I know you don't do this anymore, but like our listeners, and you didn't even you barely remember the taste, or you finish up a meal in a restaurant and you want more because you didn't actually savor and notice the flavors and the textures and the sensations coming into your mouth and coming into your body. And that to me is that's receiving food. But there's also receiving, I think there's also something around receiving help, receiving compliments, receiving.
Sure. I want to say one last thing because I just connected a dot. And that is, so when we're talking about food, a lot of this inability to receive, we're consuming food, we're purchasing it, we go to the grocery store, we buy it. Receiving, if you've ever picked a wild strawberry or a wild raspberry in the forest, it is we were doing this summer and my kid and I, and it was the best tasting strawberry I have ever had. It was tiny and it was so flavorful. And I was just in so much gratitude to the earth for giving me this delicious strawberry. And because we are not connected with nature anymore, and Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, talks about this, how because we go buy our strawberries from the grocery store, we don't have that same feeling.
No, it's true.
I didn't have to create that feeling when I picked the strawberry in the forest. It just came. I felt so much more gratitude and appreciation for that strawberry than I ever have for a strawberry, even the most delicious strawberry from the grocery store. So yeah, back to your point though, feminine energy is receiving help, receiving nurturing, receiving nourishment, receiving compliments. Yeah. Whereas a masculine energy is consuming those things.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the picture there.
Last one.
Is this the last one?
Yeah.
So there's been 5? How many have we done?
Yeah, 5 or 6, because they're so similar. There's like some of them are kind of crisscross each other. Yeah, I think there's about 7 in total that I'm listing off here. So the last one, and I actually think this could be one of the most important things, and that is that feminine energy is cyclical and masculine energy is linear.
You and I were talking about this.
Yeah. Physiologically, feminine energy is cyclical. I mean, we cycle through the month. And our energy waxes and wanes throughout the month. When we're ovulating, we feel most connected, we feel the most energetic, and we want to be out in society. When we're menstruating, we feel more tired, sometimes in pain, and it's time to retreat. Whereas masculine energy doesn't have that same cyclical nature to it. The way that we masculinize is by celebrating linear thought and operating in a linear fashion, which is we go to work every day from whatever it is, 9 to 5 or 7 to 7 for some people. And it's the same thing every day. And so at work, if women don't fit that mold, what do? We quash our symptoms. We take a Tylenol and go to work anyway. I know women who've been doubled over in the bathroom trying to hide that they're having period pain, or take birth control, IUDs, all those things that can stop our period from happening in the first place or altogether. And we do all of that. So that is not honoring our feminine nature. It's becoming completely disconnected with our cycles and our bodies.
Well, and you know what I was just thinking about as you were talking, Jen, is that women will go on an IUD to get rid of their period altogether, which I think is kind of heartbreaking. But the reason they do that is because it's so inconvenient to have it. Like, it's so inconvenient to go to work and have to change a tampon or worry about what you're wearing because you might have a leak, or they're not actually, like, they'll tell you, oh, it's so nice to not have a period. Well, it's so nice not to have a period because it's so, like, our world has made it so inconvenient to actually have a period.
Yeah. To reframe that, Cher, how nice would it be to have 3 days off of work once a month to rest and allow your period to happen? Not how nice would it be to not have one? Like, I hated having it all my life. And then I went through menopause and then I grieved it.
One of my girlfriends said that to me one day. She's like, I kind of miss my period. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do too. And I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't realized it. And as soon as she said it, I was like, I do miss it I don't know what it is about it. And we'll talk about that on another episode, because I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about when it comes to menstruation. But yeah, just to land this though, the cyclical nature is also, like, we see it in nature. So start with the sun and the moon. The sun is linear. I mean, it cycles around the earth over the year, but every day it rises. Well, the earth cycles around it.
Sorry. Yes, of course. I do know my science. But it rises every morning and it sets every night. So that's a very male way to go through life.
Yeah.
And of course we need that. Like, we need the sun every day to give us energy. And the moon cycles through 29 days. And in traditional, like in North American culture, in many cultures, the moon is always seen as feminine and the sun as masculine. And it's the same with the seasons. Like, we don't honor the change. We have to keep working the same way through all the seasons. Whereas, like, winter is the time to retreat in countries where we have like a big change of seasons. So in North America, we're coming into harvest time, consuming time, actually, because it's time to consume all that we've reaped. And then winter is retreat time. And then spring is planting time. So that's a feminine time. And summer is action time, because we are harvesting. So we just ignore all of these cycles because we're told that that's not the way to operate in life and business.
Okay, Jen. So wrapping this up, what's the most important thing we want to leave our listeners with at this point? What else do we want to tell them about this?
What I want to say is just to make this the link with living and operating in this masculine leaning energy affects not only it affects our physical symptoms in midlife because it raises our cortisol. So when our energies are out of balance, it creates stress and resistance. That raises cortisol. Cortisol is what causes many of our menopause symptoms. It causes all the sleep issues. It's the root of weight issues. So it causes our physical issues. It also causes, like, part of this imbalance that comes when we hit perimenopause is it feels like a reckoning. We're feeling that this is not possible anymore. And our body and our souls are saying, no more. Step back into the feminine power that you used to know, and you've lost it. So it feels like a crisis because that's when all of these things together are coming to a point.
Well, and our resistance to them is what causes the crisis and the contradiction. Like, your body is saying it's time now to take care of you, and your hormones, we'll talk about this on another episode, like your hormones, the shift in your hormones is actually supporting that shift.
Yes. To stop nurturing.
Right. To stop nurturing and start nurturing yourself, really, to stop nurturing everybody around you and start nurturing yourself. And it's when we resist that because our culture is so focused on, no, that's not what women do. Women nurture, women take care of everybody else. Women do this and women do that. And so we have this resistance to letting that go. And that's, to me, what causes the stress.
And it causes brain fog because we're not allowing ourselves to rest. And then we work harder to make up for it. And then we get more tired and less productive. And we feel like we have to constantly make up for it. And then like one of our clients the other day was talking about how she's losing confidence. It's all of this stuff together that's causing all of the chaos in midlife.
Yeah. And it's internal chaos. It affects the people around you, but it's all happening inside of you, in your mind, in your body, in your emotions, in your spirit.
And it feels lonely because you don't think anybody else is going through this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's exactly what is going on inside most women on the planet.
Once they hit 40, in their 40s.
Yeah.
I think that's probably like really giving our listeners something to think about. Any last things you want to say about this, Jen, before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to say that to talk about our midlife starter kit. So we have a free guidebook that can get our listeners started on identifying some of the things, some of the ways that these kinds of challenges are showing up in their life.
Yeah, it's a great starter kit, actually, because it's not about the physical stuff, although it's going to impact the physical stuff when you start to implement some of this starter kit. It's really about everything that we've been talking about today and what's, it's taking a step back from the physical and what's actually, it's getting closer to the root cause of the issues. And an impact on your physical symptoms is going to be a result. So get that starter kit. We're going to link it up in the show notes where you can get that. And come back next week for another episode. I think we're going to be talking about sleep. And so we're super excited about that and the 2 a.m. wake up call and why this is so prevalent in midlife. So come back for that. And if you enjoyed this episode, found it interesting, share it with your friends, rate and review, subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And we would be really grateful if you did that. So thank you.